So that brings us to our second In Focus discussion tonight, and we are discussing this, India on the global stage. And throwing light on this, we have Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies, JNU. And Professor, thank you very much, Professor Swaran Singh, for being with us. So India's size, scale, now becoming important in terms of the new world order. These are key determinants, you would think?
Yes. Clearly, as you said, as India emerges as a major player in international affairs, one can notice two things. One, increasing engagement of India around the world. Almost all major countries are today friendly and are engaging India. But this also is a great opportunity to explain India's position, because a major power like India cannot be simply, reiterating what others are saying or simply bandwagoning anyone, and must present its own worldview to audience around the world. And here is a great opportunity, because Indian Foreign Minister is a career diplomat, and therefore he has a deep understanding and conviction on Indian foreign policy, and the way he is able to explain rather firmly very often how India stands to be, conducting its foreign policy driven by its own tradition, its own national interests, and its own skill sets, makes it very clear that it's a great opportunity and is being utilized properly to showcase India's worldview to the world, and then therefore make a contribution which is understandable to the international community. And here is an opportunity in GlobSec2022, where you have a whole range of not just great audience but great speakers. And Indian Foreign Minister is one of the speakers to outline how India looks at the world. And he's outlined India's views on India's neighborhood, on Ukraine crisis, on Indo-Pacific. And therefore, I think it's a very good showcasing of India's not just the kind of explanatory power, but also influence and kind of engagement that India is able to build. And therefore, I think it's a great opportunity and is being utilized very appropriately by Indian Foreign Minister, the diplomat by career.
Right, fair enough. But the questions that were being put to the External Affairs Minister, they seem to come with a certain construct, and the External Affairs Minister totally rejected that. You have to either be with the US or the West, or with China and Russia. How important is this kind of a stand at a time like this, when there's a Ukraine conflict on and there are sanctions being imposed and things like that?
I think now there's a very important distinction that people in diplomacy make, being emphatic without being confrontationist. Mm-hmm. And to answer some of these European mindsets, I would say, where they, as he said, assume that European problems are global problems, and problems of rest of the world is not problems for European countries. And in that sense, to put across the real holistic picture of the world, which is dynamic, is changing, where countries like India, China, and several other countries of Indo-Pacific are today the drivers of global growth, are drivers of innovation. And that, I think, is clearly something that needs to be, pushed across rather firmly. And very often you come across in situations when India at various levels is being sort of pushed to sort of continue to be seen as a developing or a least developed country, which India is no longer. Right. And it's gradually nudging for that increased space that India today occupies. Right. And of course, as I said, India is being engaged and respected and welcomed by major powers around the world, but it's sometimes with a little reluctance. And I think that is where nudging and pushing firmly, as it is being done lately by Indian Foreign Minister, is something which is the need of the time. And therefore, this visit has multiple levels. He's meeting people at one-to-one level. He's meeting audience at a large scale. He's being visible and he's being articulate. And I think that is something which is going to really make India much more not just visible, but also credible player in international relations.
Now, the importance of going to Europe, whilst the European project is still on and having some trouble because of the sanctions and the war in Ukraine, and telling Europe that, your issues are not preeminent in this world. There are other issues as well, and the issues that you don't seem to understand and you don't take very strongly when, India is attacked by China, for instance. These are things that also matter. Afghanistan, all these other issues where India is, definitely feels that are far more important than the current situation. Probably telling Europe, this is not a Eurocentric world.
Very clearly, I think the Ukrainian crisis, with all the death and destruction, are going to be an inflection point where Europeans are going to rethink about how to look at their problems, how to solve their problems, how to engage external players into finding solutions of their own problems. And that is where I think this engagement of India with several European countries, both in terms of being firm, but also being very articulate in the sense of thanking both Czech Republic and Slovakia for their role as neighboring countries of Ukraine in India's Operation Ganga. So in that sense, I think this is a fine line that Indian diplomacy has to now play and is playing, where you are kind of explain that the world is no longer the same as it was in 19th or even 20th century. 21st century world is very different. There are going to be very different issues, very different actors, and very different influencers. In fact, influence is now moving way beyond state, both in terms of intrastate stakeholders and outside the state, multi-state stakeholders. Right. And India's, at this stage, it's at the cusp that we have leadership which is articulate, which is also fairly confident, and I think that is guided by the whole fact that India is a large-sized country, growing rapidly, transforming in terms of society, middle class, and youth here. That new confidence, I think, needs to be firmly articulated, and that is what is being done. And of course, some of these status quo powers not very often wish to make that space for India. And that's an ongoing process, and India has very effective and positive contributions in Ukrainian crisis and now also into the rethink on European security.
We're running short of time, so a final question on China, because the External Affairs Minister said it's a difficult relationship, but he also said that we can handle it on our own, which is an important statement also to the world. That and he also did mention later on, he talked about Quad, he also talked about the fact that India has taken a clear stand based on certain common values and basically democracies and things like that. So he knows where India is definitely heading in terms of which side India's common interests are. How do you view this stand on China being articulated very clearly?
I think it's a nuance, rather complex, but I think it's very effective policy that India has had in explaining the world that we are not going to be a country which is going to bandwagon the United States and its allies to deal with the China challenge. We have multivariate ways of addressing this problem, where we are engaging with Western nations in terms of reorganizing redirected supply chains to seek resilience after pandemic period. But we are not completely giving up on China. India has enormous engagement with China both at bilateral level and in various regional organizations. So that is what I think he said very clearly. India wants to underline that India stands on the side of India. And India today has weight and articulation enough to say that we did not side with one power or the other. We are an emerging power itself, and I think we need to side with our own national interests. And therefore, solving China problem of India is not going to be done by somebody else. It's going to be done by India itself, and that is what India is doing. Using a whole range of the tools that India has, both at global level, regional level, bilateral level, and all various individual levels in that sense. And that is a clear indication that India wishes to stand on its feet and engage the world from that particular position of strength.
Professor Swaran Singh, thank you very much for joining us and enlightening us on this important dialogue that the External Affairs Minister had in Bratislava in Slovakia.